So how do you know when it's time to leave a relationship? It seems like one of the hardest questions to answer, right? Because so often we have so much invested in this person. We have so much hope that things could be better. I mean, we don't want this relationship to end or else we would have already ended it. And yet, when we're honest with ourselves, we know something's not right. We know that we don't feel valued and prioritized, not consistently at least. We know that this is not how love is supposed to feel. And the truth is, you're probably willing to put in the work to make it right, aren't you? For the vast majority of you out there, you'll read the books, you'll go to counseling, you'll work on your communication, if that's what would help things. But let me guess, they have no interest in doing those things, do they? Things are fine for them. It's you that has the problem. And so today, my job is just to remind you of what you already know, that whatever you want out of a relationship, happiness, fulfillment, intimacy, connection, the truth is, relationships only work when two people are putting in the work. From all the research I've done, studying relationships for almost a decade now, I had to learn the hard way that relationships demand certain things from both of us. Love by itself with no action will never be enough to save a relationship. Think about it this way. If I stopped showing up to my job, what would happen? Well, I'd be fired, right? But hold on, I'm confused. Why did I get fired? And you would say, well, Jimmy, it's not that complicated. I mean, you didn't meet one of the basic requirements of keeping a job, which is showing up. Okay, but what if I say I love that job? I would do anything for that job. You would still say, yeah, but you didn't show up. So despite how you might feel about the job, it wasn't enough of a priority for you to do what was required to keep it. And the only reason that that analogy makes perfect sense in our minds, but not when it's applied to relationships, is that not enough people have reminded you your relationship also requires you to show up consistently, or else you lose it as well. Closeness and connection with another human demand certain things from both of us. Things like trust and safety and the ability to apologize and take accountability. It requires things like consideration and empathy. And if you forget everything else from this video, remember this: you will never feel close to someone else who has no interest in those things. And you can continue to get them to try to change. You can keep wondering if things will be better eventually. You can keep dating their potential. But at the end of the day, relationships always require two people putting in the work to make them work. And yes, my advice will obviously be a little bit different for people who are married with kids opposed to someone who is dating, unless there's any abuse going on. If there's the presence of abuse, you have to leave that relationship at least for a time and get safe. But when it comes to people who are dating, listen, I'm almost 40, so I have no idea what the dating scene is like. On behalf of everyone who came before you, I'm really sorry if we screwed it up because I hear it's a mess. I'm just here to remind you that who you choose to marry is a really big deal. And I don't say that to scare you. I say that because I know it's true. Marriage is hard. Just baseline. There is a reason that almost half of first-time marriages end, 60% of second marriages end, and 70% of third marriages end. I'm not trying to bump you out. Those are just the numbers. And all those $50,000 weddings that we go to, all those newlyweds that seem so in love and we're so excited and hopeful for their future, it's a coin flip on whether or not they divorce. That should concern all of us. And from my point of view, being married almost 11 years now, if you're dating someone who only thinks about themselves, refuses to take any accountability when they mess up, rarely if ever is curious about your inner world and has no interest in your feelings or needs or desires or dreams, it's not even close. It's not even a discussion. You have to leave that relationship. And you might say, well, nobody's perfect. I mean, I love them. And I would politely say, I don't care if you love them or they love you. Love has nothing to do with this. They can say they love you and still have no capacity to carry out what that word means. Because love means thinking about someone else as much as you think about yourself. Love is all about mutual respectfulness. Love is considerate. And you can't be considerate unless you actually learn about someone else and get curious on how they feel loved and prioritized. Love is about selflessly sacrificing for someone else. And we can usually get one partner who selflessly sacrifices. That's probably you. It's really hard to get that other person involved, isn't it? And I think if it's true, it's time for you to admit out loud, this relationship that I have right now doesn't work for me. That's important to admit because too often you're not honest with yourself. And you're certainly not honest with them because the vast majority of the time you're either making excuses for them or you don't feel safe to be honest because it would just start another fight, wouldn't it? And it makes sense that you're feeling disconnected and potentially resentful and angry about this relationship. But that anger is telling us something. It's teaching us that we're being mistreated or at least neglected in some really important areas for us. The goal isn't to ignore that anger or allow it to lash out on other people. The goal is to listen to what that anger is trying to communicate to us. So you need to admit, this relationship doesn't work for me. Now, I'm not saying that this relationship is doomed. Absolutely, it could change into something better. But let's not forget that building a foundation of trust and intimacy and emotional safety always requires two people. It doesn't work with just one. So let me ask you, does your partner have any interest in changing the relationship for the better? Do they have any interest in creating a relationship that works not just for them, but also for you? I'm not asking, could they do those things? Everyone could. Will they? Do they have any interest in putting in that work? Because knowing I should do something and actually putting in the work of doing it are two very different things that have two very different outcomes. And for some of you, I know you wish it was different, but they've shown you over and over that they aren't interested in putting in that work of accountability and self-reflection and learning how to prioritize you in the ways that you feel it most. Maya Angelou says, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And you just admitted that this relationship isn't working for you. And then you admitted this relationship isn't going to change. So you have your answer. There's only two options: leave or continue to feel alone and disconnected in an unfulfilling relationship. And I get it. It's so easy to think, yeah, but maybe I could just compromise a little bit more. Maybe I could just be less needy. Maybe if I just asked them a little bit differently, they would prioritize me more. Maybe that would work. But we have to remember, you're already bending over backwards to make this work, right? Why aren't they bending? Why are you having to beg for the bare minimum in the first place? Why do we think that that's okay? And I don't know your situation, but here's what I do know. Just because you've been dating someone for a while, just because you're invested in this relationship, it has no bearing on whether or not it's actually healthy or set up for success. That is completely determined by whether or not both people are willing to do the work that trust and safety and intimacy demand from all of us. You certainly don't have to leave. I'm simply telling you what it takes for you not to be miserable in a relationship. Because all paths have destinations, right? Don't ignore the path of a relationship where only one person is putting in the work of prioritizing growth and maturity and emotional intelligence. Because I already know the destination for that. And it's loneliness and resentment for you. Now, there's a ton of people who are married with kids, and it's perfectly reasonable that you're saying, I can't imagine what leaving would do to my family. I can't imagine how hard that would be for me if I left. And if that's you, I just want to say, I'm so sorry that you're in that spot. I won't pretend to know how scary this is for you. And I know that you just want to do what's best for your family. And on one hand, you're still hopeful that things could be better, right? You try to be optimistic. But also, you've been burned so many times before, you've lost the desire to even connect with them anymore. And make no mistake, I'm not telling you to leave unless there's any abuse. And you're absolutely right. Leaving is so hard on everyone, even if it's the right decision. And the truth is, people stay in unfulfilling marriages every day for a variety of reasons, and I'm not judging any of them. But we're answering the question, when should we leave our relationship? And the answer for anyone is, you leave when you have determined that this relationship hasn't led me to feeling fulfilled, and I'm ready to live with whatever consequences come from ending it. It's that simple. Now, some people don't leave dysfunctional relationships because of religion. And like I said before, I'm not here to judge you either way. But here's what I know. Even if you stay, that doesn't mean the destination for your relationship isn't still distance and disconnection, because your body is too smart to continue giving itself to someone who isn't safe. You can't feel connected with someone who dismisses or invalidates you. You won't feel close to someone who disrespects you consistently. And that's not an argument saying that you should leave. I'm just saying that when people mistreat you, there are consequences. When people get complacent, there are consequences. And one of them will be you eventually pulling away and feeling distant and disconnected and eventually resentful. And you're right, no relationship is perfect. But I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for safe. I'm looking for mutually respectful. I'm looking for connected. No relationship is perfect, but you don't need perfect to be happy. You just need to find someone who actually cares about how you feel loved and valued. You need someone who listens when you say you're upset about something instead of dismissing you or telling you you're making too big of a deal about it. You don't need perfect. You just need someone who you feel safe to be honest with. You need someone who sees you as worthy enough to put in just a fraction of the effort that they did when they were first dating you. You know, when they were intentional about making you feel appreciated and cherished. Because that's possible. We don't need perfect, we just need considerate. And Terry Real has a great quote from his book, The New Rules of Marriage, where he says, "Are enough of your needs being met to grieve the ones that aren't?" What a great question when we're assessing whether to stay or go. Are enough of your needs being met to grieve the ones that aren't? because we all understand that no relationship is going to fulfill all of our needs, nor should it. But that doesn't mean you have to settle for a partner who only gives you the bare minimum. And most of you probably don't even know what your needs are, much less do you know how to advocate for them. So that's step one. Learn about what I need to feel valued and respected and connected in a relationship. Step two, is my partner willing to fulfill enough of those needs that I can grieve the ones that they can't and still feel valued, respected, and connected? If so, then I think it's worth continuing to put in the work to try to make this work. If not, then it's time to move on. Or if we're going to stay, accept the fact that we won't get the relationship that we deserve here, but we are choosing to stay anyways. Every relationship requires us to grieve some of our needs going unmet, and we can still feel fulfilled in that relationship. But what never leads to fulfillment or love is when our partner has no interest in learning about or satisfying any of our needs. And for the people who decide to leave, be prepared for some immature backlash. It's easy to blame the person who ended the relationship because other people didn't know what was happening inside of it. So they're going to say things like, oh, that's too bad you couldn't make it work. But in reality, you were the only one keeping it alive. You were the only one concerned about the health of the relationship. You carried all the emotional labor. You apologized first. I guarantee it. And nobody ever blames the person who was actively depriving the relationship of what it needed to survive day in and day out. So just remember, your relationship ending is not a failure. It is not a reflection against you. You are not a failure. This relationship taught you exactly what you needed to know at this time in your life. Your job is to not let shame and judgment win, and instead step back, self-reflect, give yourself grace and compassion, and ask yourself, what am I supposed to learn in all this? For some of us, we needed to learn that if we're honest, we didn't do the best job at paying attention to the red flags in the beginning, did we? The love bombing, the inconsistency, they were hot and then they were cold. And we used that as an opportunity to prove our worth and value to them. We wanted to be liked and chosen, so we avoided any conflict to seem easygoing. We didn't notice the power dynamic, where they were dominating the relationship and we didn't get a voice. We didn't really know what equality and mutual respect sounded like, but now that we know those things, we know they're non-negotiables for us going forward. We needed to learn that being honest about our feelings and boundaries and needs isn't being too difficult. It's not being too needy. It's actually extremely healthy when done in a respectful, assertive way. And the people who don't want to be with us because we're aware of what we need to feel valued in a relationship aren't our people anyways. Some of you need to learn that you're not in control of other people's emotions or reactions. It's not your job to do all the work to maintain connection in this relationship. You deserve respect and kindness and the same consideration you give out to others. You needed to learn that it's never okay for anyone to call you names, yell at you, or silence you. You need to learn that you are valuable. And giving someone more of what they're already taking for granted isn't loving. It's actually self-sabotage, and we know that now. We needed to learn that when we bend over backwards to keep the peace, when we try to walk on eggshells to predict their emotions so we can avoid conflict or disconnection, that we're actually enabling their bad behavior instead of standing up for what we know we deserve. And if our answer is, yeah, but I couldn't stand up for myself because it would just start another fight, well, that was another red flag that we didn't take seriously enough. Because the people who care about me actually care about my feelings, needs, and limits. They don't want me feeling pressured or uncomfortable. They want to be a safe place for me to actually be honest about my feelings without punishing me for it. But it's my job to be honest about who am I surrounding myself with. Because I can't control other people. The only thing I can control is my reaction and who I allow into my circle. You don't owe anyone your time, energy, or body. And it's my job not to react when a narcissist baits me into a fight with lies or accusations, because they know if they can get me to fight and defend myself and yell back, then they win, because they still have control. It's my job to take the high road and realize I'm fighting with someone who has no interest in my perspective, and I'm fighting for someone to see my worth and value who also consistently demeans or belittles me, and this is a waste of my breath. Maybe you needed to learn that a mature person can take accountability. They care about how their words and actions impact you. Loving people can say the words, "I'm sorry," and mean it enough to change any hurtful behavior. Immature people always find a way to blame their toxic behavior on you. I needed to learn that we can still have difficult conversations about hurts and feelings or needs that don't have to turn into a fight every single time. That's actually possible for two people who say they love each other, to have discussions and actually listen and hold space for each other and validate each other. Get curious, trying to understand their inner world instead of shaming it. That's not asking for too much. It's actually the bare minimum of love. We needed to learn that there's a reason why it's so easy for us to settle into these types of relationships, where we feel like we have to earn our love and acceptance. We have to work to be seen as valuable. It's because that's what's familiar to us. That's what actually feels safe, even though it's the opposite. And it's up to us to heal from our past trauma and see why we can so quickly abandon ourselves to keep the peace. And the way I see it, whether you stay in this relationship or not, let's first take accountability and stop blaming them and start changing into the person we know we want to become. Because when we start changing our mindsets and challenging our own beliefs and start setting a new standard for how we're going to show up, we change this relationship for the better either way. Either they become inspired by our growth and maturity, and as we get more vulnerable and assertive and start setting healthy standards with them, that makes the relationship better, or they resist our standards and they shame us for these changes, which actually gives us the clarity that we were looking for and how wide the gap in our maturity and our vision for this relationship is. And it makes our decision to end this relationship a lot easier, which ultimately makes things better for us, right? Remember, we're not doing any of this for them. We're doing this for us. We have to get to the place where we can actually think, if this relationship ends, I'm going to be okay. I mean, it would hurt, absolutely, but I know I'll be okay. And I'm willing to do everything in my power to save it, but I'm not willing to do the work of two people. We're not changing to manipulate them. We're freeing them to be whoever they want to be. Show up however you want. But we're also creating a new standard in our heads, an unapologetic standard for how we know we deserve to be treated and what qualities are simply non-negotiables in our future partner. Does that seem cold and distant? Does it seem like I'm taking love out of the equation? Yeah, because love isn't going to save this relationship. Love hasn't led to any depth of intimacy or trust in this relationship so far. They would say they love you now, and yet you admitted this current relationship is not sustainable for you personally. You need to get to the point where you're okay with that. So let's be the bigger person. Let's do the work. Let's self-reflect and take accountability and apologize and grow and mature and learn about the ways that we've been showing up in maladaptive ways that harm our partner or ourselves. All the times we fought back and yelled, all the times we were critical and let our resentment get the best of us, all the time we were passive-aggressive instead of being honest, all the times we stood there and let them poke us until we exploded, we need to get honest and admit, I didn't know how to set any healthy boundaries because I was scared. But that's on me. And if you're saying, yeah, but I couldn't be honest because then they would just punish my vulnerability. It's so important that we get to the spot where we need to ask ourselves, what do we do with people who punish our vulnerability? It's a very important question. Do we ask nicer? Do we just accept that this is the way life is now? Do we stop being honest? What do you do? Because that will determine what type of relationship you have. And while I don't want you having any conversations that aren't safe, the only way this relationship has any chance at surviving is if you start to be honest. You would have already left if you didn't have hope. So that tells me you want this to work somehow. The only way that can ever happen is through respectful, vulnerable honesty. And you telling them, this relationship doesn't work for me. Is that hard? Absolutely. Welcome to the fork in the road. We either move in a healthier direction together, or as difficult as it is, I move in a healthier direction by leaving. And there's still a lot of healing that needs to take place, but you have to come to the place where you're okay if this relationship ends. And even more, this relationship has to end. We can either build another relationship together as a team, or I have to leave. But either way, this relationship is dead. This relationship, with all its toxicity, is gone. I will no longer tolerate either of us showing up in destructive ways that hurt each other. I will no longer shove my feelings down because I know now that they only come back out in other destructive ways. I will no longer make excuses for either of us. We're both either going to do better, or I'm going to do better on my own. I will not have a relationship where someone constantly criticizes me or makes fun of me or invalidates or dismisses my feelings or just plain ignores how I feel loved. It's just not going to happen. I'm going to start being respectfully vulnerable and honest about my feelings and needs. And I'm going to put distance between people in my life who punish me for doing that. And you know what? I hope they change. I really do. I hope that this is their wake-up call and it starts them on a journey towards healing and genuine remorse and accountability. I hope they get to the place where they get the help they need and become a safe place for you again. I hope you can both learn about the dysfunctional ways that you were showing up. I hope you can see your part, whatever that was, and develop a plan together on how to prioritize connection and safety and trust back into your relationship. Because that was our journey. And so I know it's possible. But it only worked because both of us were willing to put in the work. Thank you so much for watching. I'll continue praying for you, and I'll see you in the next one.